Hello, this is Giselle Gamby, business and life coach and proud host of the Intuitive Pool podcast. We're now pivoting to season 4 with an invitation to raise the stakes. I know I was made to remind people to raise the stakes, to seize, to claim, and execute the vision that you've intuitively seen, and to never accept the crumbs. What would it mean if you raised the stakes in your own life? What would you say yes to? And what would you say an undeniable no to? Be inspired, be agitated, be activated, and most of all, hold this truth, that when you raise the stakes, the quantum field will show you dreams you didn't even know you had. Hello, Intuitive Pool community. I was really inspired to record this episode for you, and I was inspired to do so because I've been in such deep gratitude to a woman who I'm going to call T, who I've been coaching only for the past 5 weeks. And we have just had some pretty life-changing, significant breakthroughs. The reason why I want to record this on the Intuitive Pool podcast is because the work that I've been doing with her, even though our story might be different to hers, or it might even be very similar, the cause of what had been going on is absolutely relevant to every one of us here. Whether we work in corporate, whether we work in entrepreneurship, whether we don't work, we're all human. And this particular cause is relevant to every single person here. So I'm entitling this episode, May This Be the Game Changer You Didn't Even Know You Were Looking For. So let me just begin with where my client T began when we met 5 weeks ago and began coaching 5 weeks ago. She'd been through a period of depression, and this had been going on for quite a few years, and it had been exacerbated by separation from her family of origin. And it was one of those magical ways that she found me through a friend of a friend. And she came to me, as I said, exasperated by the depression and the boredom and the anxiety that she'd been feeling. And so she came to me about 5 weeks ago, and she was over feeling the depression that she'd felt for the past couple of years. She was over the conflict that she'd been experiencing, and she was over the boredom that she was also feeling. And she came to me asking to receive meaning and purpose in her life. She actually thought she wanted to become a coach herself, until we saw that what is calling her is to be a chaplain in hospices. So we have gained so much momentum in only 5 weeks. And when I was with her last week, we were in absolute awe of the momentum that had been gained in the 5 weeks. She said to me that there was like a force from behind her, freeing her from the past and moving her into a future. And she just felt so different. So this is the reason why I want to record this episode here. No matter what your life story is, no matter where you find yourself, I know that this has relevance to every single person who will be watching or listening to this episode. This is all to do with identity work. And when I talk about identity, what I'm saying is it's the person who we have defined ourselves to be. And life consistently proves that definition true. The trouble is that we confuse ourselves by buying into and believing that this identity that we have defined ourselves to be is who we are. And there's a big problem with that, because as long as we're identifying with this identity, we are actually setting up a whole lot of unwanted and undesirable realities. So I'm going to demonstrate this with T. So T came to me, as I said, 5 weeks ago, and she called herself a survivor. She said, I'm a survivor. Now, how many people define themselves as being a survivor? And when they define themselves as being a survivor, there's a certain element of pride that they attach to being a survivor. Even being a cancer survivor denotes some kind of pride, as you can imagine, if you have become free of cancer. But this is where we need to be very careful. If you believe that you're a survivor, well, you are going to have things to fight against. You're going to have family conflict. You're going to have things that just happen out of the blue. You might have threats to your personal safety, violence at the very worst. You will have unexpected drama. More than likely, you'll experience shame. More than likely, you will experience rejection. And again, when it becomes extreme, you will experience depression. So all of these realities fit the role of survivor. If the survivor has nothing to fight against, well, they are no longer that definition. So when I shared that with T, she was absolutely awestruck by the fact that the story of her life was such an immaculate reflection for the role of survivor. And she even said that, that song, I Will Survive, that she would identify with that song. And as I said, feel so much pride for how much she had fought against and sometimes won and sometimes lost. Now, the moment that T saw that this was a role that she was playing, that this was a definition that she had put on herself and that it wasn't who she was, the moment she saw that while she had been identifying with the survivor and that her life was just the most perfect story with the most perfect play out for that role, what happened was she started to disengage from that identity. And her life, in the very quick time of 5 weeks, has now been rearranging itself and coming into more balance and more harmony than she has experienced in a very, very long time. So very beautiful work, very powerful work, very freeing work, and life-changing, absolutely life-changing work. When we look at the identities that we have put on that we didn't even know that we did. So I would like to share a couple of other identities that we can put on, and you may recognize yourself here. And simply through the act of recognition, as this episode title suggests, this may be the game changer that you didn't know you were looking for. And if you identify yourself here, you may make changes immediately. Your life may turn around immediately, simply through the awareness of it, simply through no longer believing that this is true about who you really are. If, on the other hand, you are so thickly embroiled in this identity, or even if there are loose threads that are hanging around and you would really like to deep dive and have a look at all the nooks and crannies of how this identity plays out, or even if I've not shared some of the identities that resonate with you, and yet you know that there's an identity that is being pointed at here, but I've not mentioned, please reach out, because my one-on-one work is extraordinarily precious and freeing. So let me begin by talking about the identity of being the rescuer. So when we're in the identity of rescuer, we set up a life where we are in relationship with disempowered people, where we are setting up a life where we are in the presence of chaos and crisis, with either someone or something that needs to be rescued. So you can imagine when we're playing the role of rescuer, just the mess that we can get ourselves in, because the role of rescuer requires chaos, it requires crisis around people or things for us to go and rescue. Now, I can put my hand up. I certainly became aware of that role that I played when I started opening up to myself 20 years ago. And I actually saw that being the rescuer was the reason why I chose my last relationship to be married to a man who was highly dysfunctional, because I could play the role of rescuer, and there is no joy there. Here's another identity that I know is common out there. Again, I can put my hand up. The identity of being the nice guy or the nice girl. And let me tell you what we're setting up when we're being the nice guy or the nice girl. We are setting up impending and inevitable disappointment and failure. Because when we are the nice guy or the nice girl, the nice person, we are handing our power over. We're handing it over to other people because we either want to avoid rejection, we want to avoid conflict, and because ultimately, at the core, we're resolving our own self-doubt and our own lack of confidence. And so we become the nice person who then hands our power over to the people that we think we need to be like. Again, I promise you that the only thing that can happen when we're playing this role, this identity, is we can only go into inevitable disappointment and failure. Know this one well and truly, and I put this one down 11 years ago for good. This one is very, very, very prevalent. My goodness, so many people that I coach, especially people in the corporate environment, people who, I have the privilege of working with people who have cancer. This is the one that is most common. It's the identity of being the one in control. I have to have control. What does that set up? Well, it sets up a storyline of incessant disarray, disorder, and turmoil. Why? It's just so ironic, right? We want to have control, but in fact, the person who defines themselves as the one who needs to have control can only set up things to have control over and bring to order. So what that means is their life is one where there is disorder and disarray, the thing that they actually don't want, but they need in order to be the one in control. So if you're looking at this, this is a very, very powerful piece of self-reflection for you to ponder, because when you identify this as being the role that you have bought into, that you need to play, and you decide to drop it, can I just tell you, and you decide to drop it from a place of self-awareness and presence, can I just tell you that you will achieve a whole lot more than you did when you were the one in control. And I'm going to give you an example. I have this beautiful, beautiful woman that I'm so privileged to coach. She came to me with stage 4 breast cancer, where her oncologist told her it was largely incurable. Now, I'm not the only person that supports her. She has a whole array of wonderful people supporting her. But the work that we did was the work that I'm doing right here on this episode. We went to the place of cause of her cancer. And the cause of her cancer from a metaphysical and psycho-emotional perspective was that she believed she needed to be the one in control. She was A-type personality, control all over the place. And of course, cancer comes, the one thing that we can't control. She's let go of this identity well and truly. Not only has she let go of this identity, but her husband has also let go of this identity. They have stepped back from their business. They have allowed others to be empowered to take responsibility and do the best that they can do in their family business. And for 3 months now, they have increased their revenue from $7 million to $10 million per month for the past 3 months. So this is the irony and the reason why I'm saying it here. The people who think they need to control actually limit what they can experience. And what they are actually setting up is a whole lot of disarray and disorder in order to have control over. The moment that they are self-aware and let go of that identity, and they show up authentically, so much more is experienced. I've seen this so many times. Let's move on to the next identity. I'm sure that there are people who will say to themselves, oh, yeah, I can see myself here. So this is the identity of being the cynical one. You know, the one that plays devil's advocate, the one that will look to the negative before they look to the positive. Now, the problem with this identity is that if they are choosing to be the cynical one, well, guess what? They're setting up in life. Life is going to continually prove to not have their back. Life is going to continually create situations where even further distrust is experienced. Life at the very extreme will set up experiences of feeling betrayed and then betrayed again and then betrayed again. Why? Because this is the only reality that someone who is cynical can experience. It's a head fuck, really, isn't it, when you think about it? But what goes in comes out. So if cynicism is there at the start, life can only reflect back a reality that is a demonstration of being cynical. So really, in all of these identities, what we're doing is we're creating what we don't want. Yet, because what goes in comes out, whatever we're feeding our subconscious with these ideas that this is who we are, the only thing that we can set up is a reality that's an immaculate, funny word, but it's true, an immaculate reflection of that. The final identity that I'd like to speak to here on this podcast is, again, this is something that I imagine that many of the listeners and viewers would resonate with this particular identity. And it's the identity of being the supporter, right? You're not up the front. You're not taking the lead. You're sitting on the sideline, or you're even sitting behind. And what this sets up is a storyline of being forgotten, of being invisible, and at worst, of being discarded. Again, I have worked with a lot of people who have played this identity out. And once they've seen it, life becomes very, very different for them. I hope that my sharing of these identities have created some food for thought, because ultimately, unless we can get to the crux of what is going on behind the scenes, nothing on the outside is going to change. Sometimes some people continue blindly believing that this is who they are until the day that they die. And all that I can say about that is what a life unlived that would be. Other times, people continue believing that this is who they are until something snaps, until sometimes the pain is too unbearable. And often that's when people come to me, often until that time when we're on our knees. And what I want to say on this podcast episode is don't wait until that's the case for you. Don't wait until something has to snap. Don't wait until something is too unbearable. Don't wait until that moment where you get on your knees. Take a look now. Where you can start is look at the life that you are living. Look at the reality that you are living right now. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are the patterns that you keep experiencing? No matter what you do, you continue to experience the pattern over and over again. Your identity will be found out if you look at the patterns of your life. If you don't look at the patterns of your life from a causal point of view, those patterns will keep on repeating. What will happen if those patterns keep on repeating? This is the fact. Highly dysfunctional relationships, messy divorces, messy family breakups, the children on one side being pitted against the other, business failures, public ones at that, promotions going to others, legal entanglements, illness, all sorts of illness, including cancer, autoimmune diseases, infidelity, patterns of being fired, patterns of being made redundant after being made redundant. These are some of the consequences of undefined identities, or of believing that these identities are who we are, and confusing that these identities are not a representation of our true nature, but believing that this is just who we are, and this is our makeup, and this is our lot in life, and this is the package that we've come into. Well, let me just say to you, that is rubbish. And let me say to you, it is life-changing in the most significant and meaningful ways when we see the identity that we've been putting on and we decide to put it down. It's where my journey started 22 years ago. Life was in disarray, highly dysfunctional relationship, violence, emotional abuse, an 11-day-old baby who passed away, absolute chaos. And then when I saw the identity that I'd been putting on, I can promise you from my experience that life was never the same again. Many of my clients say this expression, what is seen can't be unseen. Once we see it, we have the ability to choose. And I guess it would take a sadist to continue choosing to identify with the person that they have thought themselves to be, that can only create chaos, crisis, mess, disarray, disappointment, disillusionment, failure, limitation, mediocrity, half of what we would love to achieve, even if that. It would take a sadist to continue identifying with a person with a mask that they have been putting on all of this time in their lives. This is a game changer. So I just want to finish this podcast episode back to my beautiful client T. who defined herself as a survivor, and she no longer does. Now, one of the things is that when we are operating from our identity, we do learn a lot about life. So for T, because she was a survivor and she had so much to fight against, she learned a lot about compassion. She learned a lot about empathy and understanding and unconditional love. And I would say that maybe what's more accurate is not that she learned it because these aspects of herself were outside of herself. These aspects are who she truly is, that the identity brought out of her. A few sessions ago, I said to T, or I asked T, I should say, where would such absence of judgment and the ability to so compassionately and unconditionally love another be needed, be well placed? And this is where the response of being a chaplain in hospices emerged. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? And I'm just so pleased to know that T has since submitted her application for this specialised training in the last week, which is incredible momentum, as I said, in 5 weeks. So my parting words to you on this podcast is do not be afraid of meeting your identity head on. Do not be afraid of fronting up and taking personal responsibility for the life that you've been living, especially if it contains some war wounds, especially if it contains some experiences in life that you still hold in judgment, hold in shame, hold in misunderstanding, are still holding on to. Because if you face into your identity head on and you have the humility like T did to take a look and say to herself or say to yourself, let me see what I've not yet seen in order to make a difference, and a profound difference at that. Because what I can promise you is on the other side of that identity is a life that is powerful, is a life that is authentic, is a life that is nourishing, is a life that creates so much, is a life that creates so much more, and so much more of the stuff that really matters. And ultimately, what I can promise you is that this is how we live with no regrets. This is how we make sure, this is the key piece. Without this, this does not happen. This is the piece where if we're choosing to not only live a most significant life-changing year, but lifetime, which is what I'm doing, this is the stuff where that is found. Now, the final thing that I want to say before I close out this episode is that, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I have finally landed with a new program that I will be putting the details out in a few weeks' time of how you can work with me that is more affordable, that is more accessible than working with me one-on-one. Now, having said that, I do want to say this. If you are feeling the pull to working one-on-one with me, now's the time. Please reach out. If you would love to know more about how you can work with me in this more accessible way, which I promise will be so profound, I am very excited by offering this program. There is a link in the show notes where you can put down your expressions of interest. And in a few weeks' time, I'll be able to share what this program looks like. It is called Your Most Significant Life-Changing Year, again. And as I said, you can do that one-on-one with me. People know if they want to do one-on-one, if that's the way forward. I know that as a coachee when I need one-on-one. And I also know when group work is equally and perfectly right for me. So if you're interested in learning more about the group program, Your Most Significant Life-Changing Year, again, please put your name down in the expressions of interest. And if you're equally pulled to work with me one-on-one, just reach out. Thanks. Ciao for now. Hey guys, if you love this podcast, I have 2 requests. Number 1, sign up to the newsletter, which you can find in the show notes. Sharing is one of my superpowers, and there is only so much that I can share through the medium of podcasting. And I have very big plans this year to be radically generous to you. So sign up to that newsletter where you'll be able to receive a whole lot more that I trust will be super valuable to you. And number 2, I'm a massive referrer of the people I love to the people I love. Please share this episode or podcast with the people you love, and let's create some more breathtaking ripples of impact.